Hello and welcome to another expedition podcast, joined once again with Arthur and Myzrael.
Hey guys.
Hello, hello.
And we want to do a little bit of a year review today. This will be recorded. It's a new year, 2 days. It was live, it'll be New Year tomorrow. So we want to look back at 2021 from a expedition standpoint and just see what got changed, what got updated, and what were some interesting things that happened. And Arthur has it all mapped out for us, and he will just discuss these major events. So, Arthur, what do you think was the first big event that's worth talking about?
So given that this will be a 2021 year in review, I think in January, I guess not too much happened for Runeterra. They set out the roadmap for the rest of the year, which looked pretty good. And the first major expansion that came out was in February, which was the Aphelios Champion expansion. I think this was the first expansion that had only one champion in it, rather than a new region and a smattering of champions across the regions. I think this was fairly unexpected because Aphelios is also quite a new champion in League of Legends as well. So we didn't expect Aphelios so soon. But I guess they fast forwarded him because he had a very interesting play style, very complex as well. And I remember looking through his cards and not really understanding how he worked exactly with all his moon weapons, taking a little while to get to know him. When he was first released for expeditions, he was very, very strong. I remember him being probably the number one champion at one point. But since then, he has gone through a lot of changes. He's had his health reduced. He's had his moon weapons increased. Um, and he's then had his health increased again to compensate for that. But ultimately, right now, he's not in a great shape at the moment because having the moon weapons at 3 cost is just kind of too high, and the infinite value you can get with him, you just don't get the time to cast all of those things with Aphelios. So he has kind of fallen quite a lot from when he was first released, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, what I found interesting about this is that Aphelios was the first event champion. Here in the side, you have like these different expansions, and then you have events. Aphelios was the first one, then you had Akshan Viego, and now the newest one is Jayce. And Aphelios was the first one that got added to another existing bucket. So Luminous Dusk, the Diana and Nocturne bucket, only one with 3 champions right now. And I found this was a little bit of an interesting way to solve the problem of constantly making new buckets, just adding existing champions to it. There was a little bit of a discussion back then, if we liked it or not. And we honestly thought that they would just do the same with Jayce. Just take Jayce and throw him into the Lux Heimerdinger bucket. We will talk about him later.
Ground moments.
Yeah. Honestly, for Aphelios, I still like him. I didn't fully understand him either until somebody made a Reddit post about him and basically explained him. And obviously, he's the strongest support champion in Path of Champions, in my opinion. And I also kind of like him, like normal expedition runs. For example, I like him more than Leona. Probably Myzrael will kill me for that. But I just really like infinite value engines and stuff. And this would probably still be a like middle tier, but obviously not as strong as he used to be.
I think Aphelios right now is stronger than Leona. I just like Leona more, a lot more.
Okay.
Even though they're both not great, to be fair.
In terms of the win rate, both of them are pretty close. Leona is slightly ahead of Aphelios, but they're both Leona's number 31 and Aphelios is 34 out of 78. So I would say they're kind of in the upper mid tier, I would say. So that's a decent place to be in.
By the way, the Path of Champions tip is just because you have all of these moon weapons and spend infinite mana basically and play infinite cards, so you finish these quests really quickly. And that's why I really like picking up a Path. I also like playing him in positions, but then it just takes too long. Okay. I think there's too much to add to Aphelios. This event thing was new. All of the new cards got actually added to the buckets immediately. Like Gifts from Beyond is in 7 buckets right now. The Flight, the Sky Shadows was one of my favorite cards, the Cloven Way, just so much tempo. Yeah, it was
I
quite well
also really
received.
like the Cloven Way, so we have similar tastes. Looks like it.
Hey, what was the next major event?
So in March, we had our big region expansion, which was the first Shurima expansion, and that brought in a lot of champions. It brought in all 3 Ascended champions, so Azir, Renekton, and Nasus. And it brought in the new the new Shurima champions, both Talia and Sivir. And for the other regions, we had Kindred, Jarvan, Lissandra, and LeBlanc. So what was notable here was maybe that I think this was one of the times when the Mono Shurima archetype might have been a bit more viable with the Buried Sun Disk. Because this was when Shurima was, I think, the least diluted. And I have actually seen the Buried Sun Disk actually level up during this expansion. But since then, it hasn't really happened. Maybe you guys can talk more if you have seen it since then. Upon release, I don't think Azir was anything too strong. I think people were having trouble dealing with Nasus, so Nasus was quite strong, as he was a very good late game card. Sivir and LeBlanc, I think people were disappointed with how boring LeBlanc seemed to be. But in expeditions, both of them were actually very strong because they brought a lot of attack, a lot of power very quickly, a lot of damage. So they were very strong. Talia, Lissandra, I think this started a look into what the landmarks archetypes would look like. And we realized that in general, the landmarks archetype is not going to be very strong in expeditions because there's just too much of a tempo loss, especially with the countdown ones. And we can see this because Talia has since been buffed a number of times and is still nothing impressive. And Kindred has always been very strong in expeditions, even though I hear she's not particularly strong constructed because it's much harder to remove her. And once she gets going, either by killing the opponent or sacrificing your own creatures, she's very difficult to stop. And Jarvan, when he was first released, he was a 5/3. And he was still pretty strong in expeditions, but now since his buff, he is now one of the strongest champions in expeditions. So that's how much they've grown since their initial release in March.
I actually managed to see recently Sandisk flipped against me. My opponent did manage to do that, but I still won the game, so it wasn't too great for him. This was a pretty big expansion, like I see, and especially this Jarvan buff. Jarvan is right now one of the very best champions in expeditions. I rate him personally as a second one after Shyvana. Also, 2 great additions here in Sivir and LeBlanc. Even though, as you said, LeBlanc is kind of default different from League of Legends flavor, and not that exciting when I have a chance to pick her. But still both Sivir and LeBlanc very strong indeed. I've never managed myself to flip Sandisk. I kinda still want to do that, but it's pretty hard when the game, even if offer you Sandisk, does not gonna offer you another Shurima bucket, and you end up with like Piltover or Demacia cards. So no way to draw Sandisk on one.
So Sandisk was actually my first archetype I tried to draft when I Shurima started, and I remember getting close to flipping it once, but then going like 3 wins in total. It was terrible. And actually, the funny quote is the card I thought was really overpowered was the Hibernating Rock Bear. It was actually the first card I turned prismatic in this expansion, because I thought a 2-mana 5/4 would just be so insane coming from Magic and from event mechanic, but I was pretty wrong. Found out soon after when I had like a 8 Hibernating Rock Bear deck. Didn't go too far.
I also thought the countdown landmarks that generated rock bears would be good, but unfortunately they weren't. So
yeah, the Sandisk, like a meme draft on the Discord that's also uploaded to this channel. We had a fully Sandisk Seraph run, and we actually made a flip it and got like a double Narcissus with 26/26 out. It can definitely be strong and can be fun. I recently just lost to it, Nivea deck, and the Seraph actually hard counters on Nivea. But yeah, overall the Sandisk was a little bit overwhelming, and Shurima in total was a little bit not overwhelming, underwhelming. Shurima in total was a little bit underwhelming and weak at the start. People were crying out for buffs and for improvements because basically couldn't really play Shurima. And this was also the first expansion where they split apart in the release of the expansion. Those champions you see right here on the screen that weren't all released together. For example, Rek'Sai and Pyke obviously came later on. Malphite came later on. I don't remember exactly if Lissandra came later.
Lissandra was in this expansion, in the first Shurima expansion.
But one problem that Talia had was that her advanced followers, like the advanced cards, weren't yet in expeditions or weren't yet released. For example, Clockwork Curator, you actually still see it in the buckets. Talia used to have a terrible bucket where they just put in some random stuff like rock bears and Build Earth, and it was basically unplayable because it just had no units in it. Then they manually added the predict cards to the Geomancy card pool. Like a week after it was released, the people complained about it, and then they just changed the bucket, and all those predict cards got added in, and they are still in here. So if you ever wonder about why Talia has so many random predict cards, that was the reason for it. And one buff or nerf you forgot was that Narcissus used to have Fearsome. It was quite a lot more powerful than he is now. Just not being able to be blocked as easily in an unleveled form. And he was getting pulled out with Thresh. This was a pretty powerful deck that then got even more buffed. Expeditions, I found all of the archetypes to be underwhelming. Back then, Narcissus wasn't paired up with Kindred yet. It was just Slayer's Narcissus. Or was he paired up with Kindred already? Probably he was paired up. Basically, the Narcissus half only had like spells in it. One unit, Rockhopper, so it felt terrible. Basically, if you picked Shurima, you would have gotten the 2-mana challenge card from Renekton, the flip spell, this Predator. You would have gotten the same card from Narcissus. You would have gotten the same card from Azir. So you basically ended up with at least 4 to 5 Ruthless Predators each time. Of course, it's not what you want. Shurima was very weak at the changed. Yeah, Sand is always a fun strategy. One I like to do. By the way, the LeBlanc flavor, found out later on that the Black Rose Spy actually is LeBlanc, and like it's been presumed this is actually her slip mechanic. So W, if you played LOL, basically LeBlanc flashing forward, having a clone, and then flashing back, and they kind of like try to replicate this with the Black Rose Spy. Some people still like this flavor. Black Rose play never really saw play in any format. I don't know. I still think it's fine for Noxus to have like easier champion.
I've read that theory, but I assume it's just a fan theory rather than canon, right? I don't think Riot has come out and declared this to be canon. Is that correct?
Not technically, but if you look at the artwork, they look pretty similar. I would say. From the mechanic, like she transforms into LeBlanc. It's an assumption.
I do like the theory, and I do like Black Road Spy. She's pretty good in expeditions. But as far as I know, it hasn't been confirmed to be true.
I think I only played her like once. Her card to show up epic and have made it like a rare.
For me, I think she turns into Armored Tusk Riders the most. which is hilarious if you think she's actually LeBlanc and somehow turns into an armored tusk raider.
Well, everybody's LeBlanc.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 LeBlancs just talking to me right now.
Okay.
About it.
Arcane spoilers. I was a bit disappointed when the theory that Mel was LeBlanc did not happen to be true, but there's still season 2. We'll see.
Yeah, let's just see. I also watched Arcane, by the way, so I'm not getting spoiled anymore.
Good.
Finally.
Okay. Yeah, let's move on to the next important step on our yearly list.
Yep. So in May, we had patch 2.7, which brought in 3 champions: Irelia, Malphite, and Zilean. But for expeditions, Zilean was not actually put into expeditions, so it was just Irelia and Malphite. This took us a while to figure out, because at the time we didn't know each other at the time, and we just noticed that Zilean, we never played with him or against him. But eventually it seemed like on Lore Guardian, his use rate was pretty much non-existent. So I thought something was strange, and we asked Riot about why he was missing. He was still available in swap picks at the time, but not available because his bucket didn't exist. So someone did say that Zilean will be put in the next patch, in the next expansion, which was in June, about 2 months later. And we were wondering whether this was because they had accidentally forgotten him, or whether it was intentional in the sense that Zilean was going to be put into a bucket with another champion, which was going to be Echo going forward. With regards to Irelia and Malphite, the 2 champions that did get added to expeditions, Malphite was still not particularly strong and just doubled down on the archetype of landmarks not being very strong in expeditions, and has since received a number of buffs and is still not particularly strong, even though his level 2 is looks insane. It's just really hard to flip him and still have a board at the same time. Aurelia, on the other hand, came in very, very strong. And as I said, when Azir first came out, he was probably just middling. But Aurelia took Azir to the top tier, and the fact that they had the offering rate bonus increased meant that you would see Azir Aurelia in a lot of fights and expeditions. I think this was kind of complained about and constructed, and some people came to expeditions and then saw the same thing and complained about it even more. And I remember cards like the 1 mana 1/1 that gets +1/+1. What's it called?
Funny student?
Sparring Student, yeah, which when it was first in the initial base set was nothing exciting. Suddenly with Azir and Aurelia, Sparring Student was probably the last thing you wanted to see on the opponent's board on turn 1, because it meant that they had a really good start, because quite quickly they can build up Blaze and Sand Soldiers. It was a very scary 1-drop. And Azir Aurelia was very strong in expeditions as well. Personally, I actually quite enjoyed Azir Aurelia because I thought it was strong, but at with interesting kind of counterplay. It was good to learn kind of which attacks you can take to the Nexus and which attacks you can't, and how you want to kind of allocate your health across your units so that maybe the quick attack, Aurelia quick attack, won't be able to get free attacks in very easily. And I thought Azir Aurelia was very strong on the offense, but not very strong on the defense. So I found it to be an archetype which I enjoyed playing quite a lot because it was also quite tricky to play, quite tricky to play against. And I thought it was a very skill testing matchup, even in a mirror. Unfortunately, it did get too much unconstructed, and they both received a number of nerfs. I think the level up condition nerfs were actually fine, but the nail in the coffin for Aurelia was when they increased the blade dance cost. And that just costed too much. It's not worthwhile to have blade dance at 2. So that was when I think things fell apart for Aurelia. And now, like Aphelios, from kind of the top of the champions list among the top champions, she's now fallen to even worse than Aphelios. She's now among kind of the bottom champions. So very disappointing, because I thought she stayed very true to her League of Legends flavor. It's quite a fun champion to play.
Hey,
Yeah.
this was a very interesting point in the history of Legends of Runeterra. Probably one of the most debatable ones, because they, like the other content creators, argue that this blade dance mechanic should just not exist, and it's very unfun to play against. Someone at Riot really liked it and they didn't want to rework it, so they tried keeping it in with probably the most changes ever. And quick summary would be like Azir changed from 10 to 13, Aurelia changed from 12 to 14, Red changed from 1 to 2 mana, a bunch of random cards nerfed, like the Dunekeeper used to be a 2-1, basically 4 damage on turn 1, the Inspiring Marshal, a 5 mana 4-6 instead of a 6 mana 4-5. A number of other changes were made, and this was actually the only time the Expeditions got a hotfix as well, because Aurelia bucket was fairly balanced. It added a bunch of bad cards, for example, the newly added Shadows of the Past into 5 mana recall all of your allies, and just basically added all of the recall cards into the bucket. Aurelia's bucket was never too strong. Someone just put in only 2 comments into the token attacks Azir bucket. 2 comments were Doomkeeper and the other Sand Searcher, Sanderator, Sandcrafter. So there were people on Reddit who had like decks with 17, 14 or something Doomkeepers, and you basically, it was a time where expedition speedruns became a thing. People just like hard forced the Aurelia and then went to 7 wins in under 30 minutes because the games were just so insanely quick. Stack. Yeah, at this point, I don't know, it doesn't really fail. Like, I guess, Arthur, you liked the format, but I found it just to be too fast, and all the other strategies were not really that viable. Remember, that's actually when I started crafting or doing content on Twitch, and then just jokingly always picked up Azir and said when I wanted to do like a speed run in the end, go that long, and it always went straight 7-0. Because, yeah, it's just nothing you can do against the set, and 8 damage on turn 2. They then hotfixed the Azir bucket and added in some random cards like Bloodthirsty Marauder and the Doomkeeper, for example, and Baking Sands, so made it a little bit more random. In my opinion, Aurelia never was the problem, and the Azir bucket was what made it so strong. Time when Mono Shurima was insane, not because of the Sun Discs.
Yeah, but looks like from what you guys are talking about, since I didn't play back then, looks like they did try to fix this, and they did that. They fixed the problem. They identify it and find a solution. Was it a really long time when they had this situation when so many games was against Azirelia before the nerfs in expeditions? Or it was rather quick solution. How do you remember that, guys?
I think it was like 1.5 months before they figured it out, and because we just bombarded them on Twitter. Last wrote a bunch of posts. I started writing posts. Arthur, I think you wrote like a post or 2. I also saw what's going on Reddit. Insane. Just posts 14 cards and 14 copies of the same. I don't know exactly how it was, but not immediately. Later I would.
Yeah, I've never had 2 digits of the same card. I think 8 was my record. I think Bandle Commandos was my record.
And it wasn't even hard. Like I had like 3 drafts or 4 drafts where I just had 7 Dunekeepers.
Yeah.
14 is a
Yeah,
little bit
with
high, but
only
11 was
yeah,
pretty easy.
quite understandable with only 2 commons in the bucket. There is no such buckets right now, and I think they keep this in check. So there is no such situations now.
Yes. It's nice that they actually hotfix expeditions if it's really broken. Guess it's not yet right now. Arthur, do you remember how long it actually took for the bucket?
I don't actually. I don't think I really noticed it as such. I kind of remember discussing it with some people on this subreddit, this Discord actually. It was um it was the guy with the Beethoven avatar. I forgot what his name was. But he was very much against the Aurelia archetype, and I was saying it's a strong archetype, but I don't think it's broken. Um, yeah, I certainly knew a lot of people who thought it was overpowered and not enjoyable. So
Have you ever played it against it in constructed when it was at its
I have played against it. This was also, funnily enough, a time when there was some 2v2 labs. So I actually played it with some friends. So one of my decks was Azure Aurelia, and I also built some decks which were against Azure Aurelia. So one of them being the Nasus and
That's just trash.
was it? Yeah, okay. Which was a decent counter to it. It was a strong deck, certainly. And I've, yeah, both played a little with and against. That was some of the time when I had some incentive to play some constructed in the 2v2 labs. So I did try it before, yeah.
was like the worst meta ever. Like just
Really?
completely rock, paper, scissors. Like the Aurelia countering Nasus. And there's no Nasus countering the Aurelia countering Lissandra Bandle, and Lissandra countering Nasus. And basically you just have be lucky. Deck had like a 70% win rate against one and a 30% win rate.
Mm.
Terrifying. Yeah, in Expeditions it wasn't as bad. Luckily they fixed it in the end. All quite balanced, and sadly Aurelia is
Yeah, it's really hard to make every meta good in card game. So the thing that this happened only once is also pretty encouraging about the game.
yes. Okay, then let's
So in May 2021, it's not an expansion as such, but we did also have another major event, which was that one of the leaders in expansion, one of the people who co-built it, in fact, Paul Sottosanti, he actually left Riot in May, which was a shame because up to this point, we did actually get regular updates in the patch notes with regards to expeditions. So we saw certain cards moved in and out of buckets to address certain regions or archetypes being too strong or too weak. And kind of reasonings were a lot more thought out when they're written down in terms of the patch notes. So I feel like in retrospect, this kind of marked a change in terms of how Riot treated expeditions. And since then, expedition has been thought about a lot less. Possibly because there was the kind of PvE labs coming up, which was getting more popular, and then as we now know, the Path of Champions being released with Arcane was a huge project undertaking, so they needed a lot of resources on it. So taking a mantle was Alex Lee, who is now maintaining the spreadsheet and presumably reworking and balancing the buckets as well. But certainly we've seen this kind of frequency drop considerably since Paul left. So hopefully for 2022 we'll see an increase as in terms of resources spent on expeditions, um, as there is no Path of Champions to release next year, as far as we know.
yeah, that was really sad to see this person leaving. Actually didn't play that much. Like I just joined during the Targon event just before Aphelios hit. Months before. And I never really got into the part where we got regular expedition updates. So I was happy when I got the first one. Sad to see that put too many resources on expeditions. Not that popular for format anymore. Some people still play it. More updates would be helpful, and especially like bring people back to the format. Imagine having like a flashy button here, play the Path of Champions, bunch more people. And I kind of doubt that they stopped working on Path of Champions. Now the map is not finished. Probably are working right now on the other regions and add them in periodically. So I don't quite think the app is going finished. Hope they don't forget about Expedition. For some bad.
Yeah, I think the point that Arthur made in this about the changes, that there was a lot of informations in patch notes before, and now there is a lot less both changes and informations in patch notes. I think this is kind of what I wish the most for the next year in expeditions, that the many changes and many informations about expeditions, good communication about the format going to come back for the 2022. I think this is what is important for me mostly, because I kind of want to know what will be happening with my favorite format of gameplay in Legends of Runeterra right now.
Okay. So let's hope that more resources or hire someone to take care just of expeditions. What's the next major event?
So after this in June, towards the end of June, we had the third expansion out of Shurima. And this released Pike and Rek'Sai and Echo. And finally, we got Zilean added into expeditions as well, which who got partnered up with Echo. For expeditions wise, I would say this was probably the weakest expansion I've seen yet. Both Pike and Rek'Sai sit along the bottom of the champions for expeditions. That archetype is very much all in lurkers, and it's very hard to get a lurkers deck that is consistent and won't die on the attack back, even though it's quite strong on the offense. Zilean and Echo also aren't particularly strong either. The predict archetype is in expeditions just kind of not very strong, because generally when you're predicting, you want to find the very strong cards out of a selection of silver bullets. Whereas in expeditions, what happens often is you just have a large range of mid-range cards in terms of power level. So the fact that you're able to choose between which of the cards doesn't matter as much, because the difference between the power levels of the cards you're predicting isn't that different. So yeah, both lurkers and the predict archetype have been struggling to do anything in expeditions, unfortunately.
Yeah, Zilean was like, I remember Pido actually saying back then that the constructed people just got 3 champions, but we got 4 champions. I was so happy to finally be able to play with Zilean. And I remember immediately after my first my first game of the draft, trading him premium, a prismatic, then as well buying the board for him. And he's since been one of my favorite champions again, just infinite value engine. Guessed like infinite value engines. And I don't really understand why he is so low in win rate. I rarely get him offered. I always try to make him work. But generally don't go for Echo as a synergy, so that I just tried to build up a Railroad deck with control elements and time bombs. Yeah, the other ones were pretty underwhelming, as Arthur said before. Lurkers, I never really had 1/7 win with Lurkers before, but just don't really make sense or just are too inconsistent. Expeditions, we had like an argument about that today. Discord, where we discussed how we could buff Lurkers and if it would actually be good to buff Lurkers because it's such a self-building deck. I found this quite interesting because I personally think that these high synergy buckets should be a little bit more variance, because if they would just be the perfect decks, always like come together and be very strong and fun to draft in the end.
Yeah, and to play against mostly.
Exactly. And a lot of people were like unhappy when they tried Pike and Expedition, the Rex they can pick. Posts showing up. I picked Pike, but then didn't Rex. Now I have a terrible deck. Bad. Yeah, like Rexel was fine. Like with the offering bonus, now she's weaker. Pike is just never playable in my opinion. One of the weakest champions right now, according to stats.
Yeah,
Yeah,
according
the
to Balcom,
weakest.
according to Balco, both lurkers are in top 3 weakest champions right now, except Irelia. Only Irelia is lower, so this shows everything.
Yeah. So, Myzrael, what is your experience with like Predict and Lurk?
With Lurk, I never played Lurk in expeditions. Honestly, the strategy doesn't look very appealing to me, and I never played any of this. I played a lot of Echo though, because I really like Echo, and I was trying to make him work, but I really wish he's a little better. I really wish we would start at least with this 1 point of health, so he's a 4/3. And I still have 100% win with Zillian in expeditions. I have this one run with this Noxus deck that went 7-0, and Zillian went 6-0 because I traded him away before the final boss.
What's interesting is that upon their release, I think Pike and Rek'Sai were the strongest that they've ever been, and since then has only decreased in power level. The reason for this is because they're very high synergy archetypes, and they rely very much on themselves, call that parasitic in terms of game mechanic. And over time, as more cards get added to their regions in Bilgewater and in Shurima, their pool gets diluted, even if their bucket doesn't. So just more options will get offered in terms of wild picks and sometimes even synergy picks as well, which means that you won't be able to synergize with itself as much. This is why when it first released, I did play a bit trying to make Pike and Rek'Sai work, and they weren't particularly strong, but they weren't probably the worst either. But now over time, it's gotten worse. So if in the future you want to kind of win with these high synergy champions, the best time to do it would be upon release, because after that, generally, they tend to get less support rather than more support over time.
That's actually something that changed as well, because we used to get some random cards, random archetypes. For example, the Shrieking Spinner was added in later on, and there was a spider card, and it got added like Shurima release, I think, and just buffed up these old archetypes. We have been missing these variety picks, latest expansion, Bandle City, and certainly hope they would come back, because I always laughed about this game that old archetypes are just get forgotten, but they still get new. And yeah, but back then the meta was to actually draft Rexel without Pike, just stay in this Shurima bucket and pick all of the lurkers, because they just worked better than the Pike, who had more bad cards into pools. Found it quite interesting. And in 1/2 of the bucket. That was also my only 7 win run with the Shurima lurkers.
We can see this in quite a lot of strategies, honestly. Like, for example, if you play Lux, you should abandon Piltover side. If you play Poppy, you should abandon Demacia side of Mentors to see Vanguard lookouts and stuff. So this actually happens in expeditions that one side of the bucket is significantly better than the other. So I'm not very surprised that with Lux, with Lux, this can go the same.
Interesting. I learned about Lux being better alone later on. Drafting her. Hammerdinger and it didn't work out too bad. Crash. Changed my opinion. Okay. Let's move on to the next point.
Yep. So with the third part of Shurima wrapped up, that was it for the region. And in July, what we had was the Ruined King event, which brought in both the Ruined and the Sentinels in terms of Viego and Akshan. So Viego was brought in alongside Shyvana in terms of the bucket, and Akshan was brought in alongside Riven. Both of these had increased bonus offering rates that probably outstayed their welcome well into Bandle City. So for quite a long time, all four of these champions were offered quite a lot. So we would see it in expeditions quite a lot. This coupled with the fact that all four of these champions are very strong means that you have a bit of a survivorship bias in the sense that in the later games, when especially in the 6-win final bosses, you'll see these champions a lot because they're very strong. So they have managed to get those 6 wins to get to the final boss. And that did turn the expedition's meta a bit more, had a little less variety than we're normally used to. I think both of these champions were a bit stronger than I expected. Akshan, over time, has proved himself to be one of the top champions, despite coming from a relatively weak region of Shurima. But his bucket is very strong, and he himself is very strong. I think I was confused about how he actually worked before. So I didn't expect him to be as strong as he did. And then Viego is also pretty strong as well, especially if you manage to get him back with Rekindler. And if he's flipped, he's very difficult to deal with, and he's not too difficult to flip either. He's just a threat that kind of you have to deal with before he flips. So both of these champions were very strong. And a bucket champions that came and the champions that came in their buckets, I think this is the time when Shyvana really became overpowered. During this time, got quite a considerable buff with the Ruined Dragon Guard and Cadragon the Ruined. And yeah, these were kind of the things that those champions needed to. I think Riven, what happened with her was you ended up being able to load up on Trafarian Glory Seekers with the quick attack blades and things that gave quick attack, and it became a very consistent combo to be able to pull off in expeditions. So all four of these champions and their archetypes were kind of dominating this expedition's meta.
I was thinking about Akshan when you talked about Aphelios before. I remember seeing him being, and before I had like a little book with all of the cards written down, all of the different effects and combat tricks and stuff. I was like, oh my god, what is this champion? I'm not writing this all down. I just have to like manually find out what he does by playing against him. I eventually did. Time showed that it's only like one right way to play him or one way consistent, like with the draw ones. Usually the best one to go for. That point on, Akshan got a little bit more solved, but he's quite good to his league counterpart, whereas Kit is way too overloaded, way too much going on, and constantly see players being confused about him. So I also really like his game style, play style. Viego and with the buckets, Arthur already talked about it. A lot of same stuff going on. And Viego Shyvana was also like an archetype. Didn't really want, in my opinion, you don't really want Viego and Shyvana together. Just want to have Viego or Shyvana, and Viego goes better into like do Shadow Isle stacks, sacrifice stuff, while Shyvana better with more Screeching Dragons, Shadow Isles card. So I completely underestimated Viego at first. He's really, really powerful, in my opinion. Not quite the most powerful champion ever. Remember one side seeing like champion ratings, champion tier list, and Viego was like an A++, and the next champion was like a B. Like pick Viego over everything. Was not the case. Definitely stronger than I imagined it.
Yeah, therefore Viego and Akshan both still very strong, and it's really good reason to not pick any of these two if you want to go for wins. Seems like really less variance meta from what Arthur said, so I would not probably found big amount of fun in this meta since 4 champions were overly popular. Yeah, it's therefore better if this is more spread out around many different champions, this offering raid bonus. Also, I still don't fully know what Akshan do when especially after flipping, even though I played him quite a few times, and of course after first palace being a countdown. You should go for draw normally. Normally draw is the best. That's true. Definitely.
Just have to learn him in League. Figure out what as well.
I agree that I tend to do the predict and draw the most as well. But I think I've done probably all 3 of these, even the Sandstone Charger. I probably use the grant all allies +1/+0 the second most, maybe. But predicts probably like 70% of the time or something. Maybe like 70, 20, 10 or something like that.
To go for the charger more often, actually. Like this charger with vulnerable attacks, for example.
Yeah. I've had someone try to do that to me today, actually, but I had a combat trick in response, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the complexity creep, this is something that is present in pretty much all games. And I think it's okay. I remember feeling the complexity creep for the first time when Lee Sin was first released, because out of the kind of Foundations champions, nothing was particularly complex. And when Lee Sin was first released, kind of people expected him to be pretty complex because he's pretty complex in League of Legends terms, although he's complex for an old champion. And then he got released in Runeterra, and I remember him thinking, yeah, this is pretty complex in terms of he now has his champion spell is actually 2 spells because he wants to scale up with spells and so on and so forth. There's all kinds of stuff. In retrospect, now we have Aphelios and we have Akshan and ever more complex champions. So Lee Sin doesn't look too difficult now anymore. But I think this is what happens in games that kind of wants to maintain its current audience. So, from our perspective, we play a lot of expeditions. We love it enough to record a podcast about it. We're the kind of enfranchised players who welcome this kind of complexity because it makes things more interesting. Um, Whereas for newer players, they might struggle a bit. So hopefully they'll get that balance right and provide both for us interesting champions to play with, but then also not crowd out the newer players either.
Fully agree with that. They should all still be accessible. I think it makes it easier with Aphelios because you played League before, you kind of know what his weapons do at least a little bit. Like red one heals, degree fast, it's wide. Akshan, it was just completely new mechanics. Not really something he does in League. Resurrect and dies. doesn't have like a lose example as you. That's why it was fun in particular. Yeah. Hope they will find the good balance, and I think they found the good balance because I actually really like the Saga Seeker for that reason, because it's just not a complex card. New card, faded keyword is something that everybody just understands immediately, especially with Pantheon. I think it's a very good deck to have as a meta deck. Pantheon being a very simple champion, you've targeted allies, and then he gets a bunch of keywords. It's not hard to understand. Still interesting to play. I like this about lore that doesn't have like complex cards and just has simple effects. I remember back then when I started playing, even Jinx was too much for me. A little bit crazy, but it took me like a few months to learn that you can discard the cards immediately and get a Mega Rocket, for example. I kept losing with it like at the time, and I couldn't figure out why I kept losing.
I like Pantheon and the Pantheon's design. I really like Pantheon as a champion, but I really don't like Saga Seeker. The idea that you play one drop and this one drop sticks around until the end of the game and you do a finishing blow on 10-11 like I did today, it's not something appealing to me. Saga Seeker shouldn't be 1 mana. I think this kind of card shouldn't be 1 mana.
I like it for the design reasons, not for balance reasons. We can talk about Saga Seeker another time, as it will be too long.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
I like it because it's simple and not like with newer other cards from other card games, for example. They had like way to overload and have like 2 different sides and 1,000 effects. 1 mana 1 to faded. But it understands with it.
You say everyone knows what that means. I have had a couple of people try and get the second fated trigger in the same turn against me and then not getting it and Saga Seeker just dying. And still I see kind of people being confused about, oh, I'm trying to buff things twice in 1 turn. Why is Pantheon not proccing? It's leveling up. So yeah, people need to read the cards more. And even though Pantheon Fated is not particularly difficult, the number of keywords that it comes with, or even has the potential to come with, is actually quite a lot. And I saw an infographic the other day that that Runeterra already has more keywords than Hearthstone does. I haven't played Hearthstone for a while, but I'm quite surprised by this because Hearthstone is quite a lot older than Runeterra is. Does that sound about right to you, Myzrael?
I think this might sound right, especially because Blizzard from Hearthstone decided at some point that they want to have less keywords and even reverted some, changed the card that the card has the text rather than the keyword. There was such cases, so I'm not fully surprised by that. And like keywords in Hearthstone is like 1 per expansion and no more, and like 3 expansions a year. So it that doesn't come too often, and if they even remove some keywords from the past, it might be actually correct. If we compare standard to ladder right now, so like competitive formats, I'm 100% sure that Runeterra have more keywords. But if we talk about all of the keywords from the past, then it may be quite close, and I'm not sure about that then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was quite surprised by that. And I normally encourage my friends who don't play as much Runeterra as me. Whenever a new expansion comes, just play the challenges against the AI so that they understand what the keywords do. But now I think there are so many of those that I don't even know how many of there are those challenges in the game. That telling them to do it or to learn what all of the keywords are will be a challenge in itself. So, pun intended. Um, uh, so that might be one part of Pantheon that may be hard for new players. It will come with 5 random keywords, but good luck finding out what each of those keywords do. So they might have to just read the keyword tooltips to find out what their new Pantheon has actually come with.
It's
I
44
counted
challenges
challenges
right now.
real quick.
44 it is, I counted already.
Yeah, I also counted and also wanted to say that. So yeah, it's 44.
That is a lot, yeah.
And they kind of admitted that it's just like tutorials, not actually fine. Yeah, right now I just give everybody a new player the advice, just like play one deck that you really like, for example, like spiders, figure out what your stuff does and kill them. Don't kill them, and read their cards and what they do. Better than just sitting down and reading all of the 1,000 cards and playing all of the challenges because nobody really does that. I agree with Riot about this. They don't want people to just sit there and play all the challenges. They just want to have them play Power of Champions first because actually there you need to learn a lot about the game, I think. Up the keywords one by one. I think it's actually a good way to introduce.
Yeah, Path of Champions seems good for a start. But I would also recommend spending your tokens for expeditions
Exactly.
if you're a new player. In expeditions, you can choose something that you find interesting and then learn a lot because you play against much wider and much wider options of decks in expeditions. So you can see many champions, many keywords, and learn more and quicker.
Plus, there's a time limit. Drafting parts, you can read all the cards and give them a try. And if it doesn't work out, you didn't really lose at anything because.
Yeah,
Well, but
that's
let's
fair.
get back to the topic here. What's our next point on the list?
So in August, we had our kind of biggest event of the year. Myzrael comes back into Legend of Runeterra and rejoins us.
Woo!
Yeah.
Secondary to that, we also had the Bandle City release, and this was a large number of champions all in one expansion. So we had Senna and Viego, who had the Darkness archetype, Scion, who kind of doubled down on discard strategy, Ziggs, who had kind of destruction of landmarks, Poppy, who was mentors in terms of increasing smaller allies, Nami for spells, Caitlyn for traps. Zareth, I guess, also worked with Ziggs in terms of destroying own landmarks, and Tristana for world travelers, so multi regions. Bandle City was yeah, pretty big shake up to the Runeterra expeditions. Some of the things upon release. So I think um when Vigar first got spoiled, I thought he wouldn't be very good because they didn't have very many support for Vigar, or they didn't spoil very much of the Vigar cards that created darkness. I thought he was the only one who created darkness. But then as time went on, we realized that he actually had quite a considerable amount of support, especially with Senna, who generates infinite darkness. And when we first played it, this was a new kind of control archetype, which was fairly. It's been a while since we've had a real control archetype new to Expedition, so this was quite refreshing. And I quite enjoyed both playing with and against, and especially in the mirrors as well. I thought it was very skill testing in the sense that you had to identify which were the important cards and which were cards that you don't want to waste your darkness on. There were key moments when you get to kind of in a couple of turns reduce their nexus from 20 to 0 because you're just delivering darkness straight to their nexus, either with the Ixtali Sentinel or with Vigar. And it was, yeah, a very skill testing matchup, I thought. And in for the other champions, I don't think there was kind of so Poppy and Tristana were both very strong. Poppy since received a number of nerfs we've discussed plenty. And the others were kind of disappointing in terms of how strong how weak they were. I think both Zareth and Nami are just innately weak. Whereas Ziggs as an individual card is decent, but his archetype is not particularly strong. Same thing with Caitlyn. I'm a bit disappointed that she turned out not to be as strong as I would have liked. And lastly, Scion, who I think the discard archetype, is not particularly strong. So I wouldn't try and go for the Scion Discord archetype specifically. But if you just play him as a finisher in the way that Darius is, eventually you will get to 35 power just played rather than discarded. And then he serves as a fantastic finisher. So that's how I prefer to play Scion.
Yeah, for me, this is the starting point to play Legends of Runeterra at all, and also Expeditions. It's not a secret that I'm addicted to darkness. I always pick Senna or Vigar whenever I have a chance to, and I really love this type of decks and this type of archetypes. Control deck that cares about the board initiative and wants to stay even on the board, and at the same time builds towards its win condition. They are both very strong to this day. Senna and Vigar, you need really good reason not to pick them. And the same case is for Tristana, and I still think Poppy is strong. I really like this expansion at all, since there is a lot of champions that I like. Also Caitlyn, that I didn't name before, even though I also wish Caitlyn was a little bit stronger. These champions, many of them, as I said, top tier. Scion is great as a finisher, as Arthur pointed out, this Darius style. Nami, fortunately, Nami is not great in expeditions. I would not like her be really good because of the effect, especially if with elusives, losing the game out of nowhere is not fun. If they like found some pranks or cheap spells to proc Nami a lot, and Zerat, destroying landmarks, archetypes around landmarks are not great in expeditions. That's true. I saved Ziggs for last because I think Ziggs, if you pick him only in Bandle City without his second region in Shurima, only in Bandle City Ziggs is actually above average, and because of Bandle City being good. And Ziggs, if you pick him only with Bandle City, is actually above average champion.
Yeah, I think everything about these different champions has been said already. Two things I want to add is like Ziggs used to have a damage amplification aura at Sign. They confirmed that. Used to have like all my skills and spells deal 1 more damage, similar to Funsmith. That's why he has like these weird deal 2 damage to unit, deal 1 to 2 enemies. Flipped, he would have dealt 2 to all enemies. And then Xerath also deal 2 or deal 4 at this point. And I'm sad he got changed. That he kinda doesn't have own identity anymore, in my opinion. Like half of his cards just don't sense with him anymore. But he definitely is a good standalone champion just by being 3 mana 3/4. And another thing, like a funny quote maybe, Xerath Obliterate it instead, the one quote on the level 3 Xerath actually came into play once against me, but I played like Anivia, had 3 Anivias on the board, and I just like obliterated them instead of giving the egg. It was sad to lose to this level 3 quote. Quite a funny moment. But yeah, basically agree with everything else we said, and we've talked about these yordles multiple times in the past. I have one last question from Myzrael. Why did you decide to come back to Legends of Runeterra with Bandle City? Are you such a big fan of yordles? What was the reason?
I didn't know what is Yordles at all. It's just I started playing Legends of Runeterra, and around New Year, my friend that keeps showing me great games, a lot of different great games, showed me Slay the Spire, so I started to play Slay the Spire a lot. Then the season in Hearthstone come online, so I played Hearthstone a lot. And then near the end of Hearthstone season, around September, when I was bored with Slay the Spire because it's too repetitive, then I decided to look for something else, and I remembered that there is Legends of Runeterra that I played in the past. Maybe I should give it a try again, and I did.
Were you like okay with the yordles at first, or were you like that it wasn't the void or like Ixtal? Or you don't even know what this is, or do you? I don't know.
I didn't know what this is. What is this? What is it at all? I played mostly ladder at the very start. I played my old decks in spiders and elites. It wasn't very good, so I found Misfortune deck, and I played this a lot. And then I started to try expeditions. I got like my first 7 wins with Ionia deck. With I don't remember which champions because this was like 7 greenlight duos or something like that. And then I played more Bandle City. I started losing to Poppy, so I decided to give her a try. First Poppy, then Tristana, then Vigar, and it snowballed from there.
Actually made a break before Bandle City as well, but then like I just pulled out my phone at some point and saw that it still had the game installed, and I opened it and saw Viega and Senna. Those two actually brought me back to Expedition, and back creating more content like at all. Played a lot of League of Legends instead. Happy that I'm back to this, and I stopped playing League of Legends again. Game is just demo. Okay, let's move on to the next topic though.
So before the next expansion, there was the first ever Legends of Runeterra World Championship, which was a purely constructed event. It was won by Alan ZQ, who is Polish, and we're proud of him being European here. Unfortunately, there was no expeditions involved. It's, I guess, not in a shape well enough to be at World Championship level, but limited formats have been competitive in other card games like Magic the Gathering. So maybe one day there will be a limited format, probably expeditions in Runeterra, hopefully.
Let's hope. Become the world champions in some point.
Yeah, you would not have a chance, guys. You would have an option to fight for second place because I would win the world champions. So yeah,
Or you would win.
of course, who better?
Gotta be another poll, right? So
Yeah.
I think Porobot would beat you first place. Yeah.
You don't underestimate Porobots. I keep seeing shades on stream often, all the time losing to Porobots, so don't underestimate Porobots.
Okay. Porobot would be the real champion. That's okay.
So
Yeah.
in November, we had patch 2.19, which was kind of the arcane patch. That brought Jayce and Path of Champions into Runeterra. But as we've mentioned before, he was not put into expeditions and still has not been put into expeditions yet, and it's been 2 months now. We have kind of a tweet from Riot support saying that he will be added to expeditions in the future, but with no ETA on when that will be. And there were some theories of whether he was going to be added later intentionally with his bucket partner, like Zillion did, or whether it was just completely forgotten about, unintentional. At this point, we still don't know. It's still, everything is unconfirmed. We know that the Magical Misadventures expansion came out, and he wasn't added, and none of those champions work with Jayce. So either he will be added sometime before February, which is when the third Bandle City expansion will be added, or during that time, or after that time, or maybe never. But if anyone has any idea, please let us know, because at the moment we're confused about why he isn't added, because similar to Aphelios, I don't think it will be too difficult to just throw him in with Lux or Heimerdinger or someone else who synergizes well with spells.
The main difference between Zillion and Jayce is that Jayce is listed in the events bucket or events section. Doesn't really belong to a normal set. He's put it in later on. First, I'm looking forward to finding out who his partner will be. Maybe they will nerf Aphelios again, make his moon weapon 6 mana, and then they work with Jayce. They're like happy partners.
That would be pretty fun.
Something else interesting to note in terms of difference between Jayce and Zillion, I guess, was that when Zillion was not available in expeditions because of the he wasn't in a bucket archetype, he was still available as swap picks, and I think his supporting cards was also the same way. But Jayce and his supporting cards have not been added to the swap picks pool at all in Expeditions. In fact, I don't think anyone has spotted Jayce being able to be swapped or played against him. Lord Guardian has not picked any trace of Jayce or his supporting cards. Which is a little disappointing. So there are actually, it seems like, two pools of cards cards being available in Expeditions, and Jason's supporting cards just don't exist anywhere in this pool. So that's a little disappointing.
The one thing that could have happened is that it's not pools, but they just like added in Cillian as the Time Lord's bucket as well. Just put him on a pause without actually releasing him. That's why he showed up in trade picks, but I don't know why Jayce doesn't even have bucket designed yet. What is
Yeah, that's true. I'm surprised that they just didn't show him into grand moments. I think this would be a great solution to just put Jayce into grand moments since he have good synergy with the bucket already. We could have maybe a reason to go into Piltover with Lux because of Jayce. Since Jayce is strong, Jayce would be strong in expeditions. So I think that this would be a potential solution. So I hope that this doesn't happen because they have good plans for Jayce, and we're gonna see some other good, cool synergistic option for Jayce in the future.
okay? And the last one is then probably just expansion.
Yep, that's right. That's the Magical Misadventures, which we had at the start of December. I think these champions we've already spoken about quite a lot, and very little has changed since then. I guess, kind of in retrospect, after a couple weeks of playing, I still think the Recall Synergy archetype is not particularly strong. And I still think Pantheon himself is not that strong, but maybe his archetype can be strong. I haven't worried too much about him in my games against him. And Rumble, I also haven't had too much experience against him either because his offering bonus wasn't boosted much. So hopefully we get to see more of him in the future.
I actually have a good experience with Rumble. I think Rumble is pretty strong. He's definitely above average. I think in our rating I rated him somewhere like 6 or 7. I think he's definitely above average. I don't really like both Ari and Kennen picking them, even though Kennen is likely to work. But I am, as I stated earlier, worried about Pantheon, not Pantheon himself, but his archetype with this Saga Seeker card still. This is my main concern about expeditions right now.
It's like with the LeBlanc card. LeBlanc is actually Black Rose Spy, but Pantheon is actually the Saga Seeker, right? So
Yeah. Conan, do you have something to add?
Conan?
Okay. Yes, I agree with what you said before, and I would just we talked about these champions multiple times before, and I definitely agree that we talked about them already. And yeah, what do you guys think? Should we discuss about Charm again? If you think Charm is good or not? Didn't do that before, right?
Mhm. But yeah, overall to wrap up, 2021 has been, I think, pretty good year for Legends of Runeterra. We've seen a lot of champions released, a lot of interesting designs. Some of them are strong for expeditions, some of them are not. Unfortunately, I think we have seen a decrease in terms of resources spent on expeditions, but hopefully in 2020 they'll make a turnaround. And we're going to have the roadmap coming soon. I think, and I'm looking forward to that. And I think just next week we're going to be seeing some patch notes with some balance updates, which will mostly be targeted at constructed, but will no doubt will have an impact on expeditions as well. So we'll deliver our comments in terms of how they'll affect these cards and expeditions next week. But yeah, for 2022, some of my resolutions for Riot that I would like would be just more resources into expeditions. Just give people more stuff if that's what they want. You know, shards, prismatics, whatever. A leaderboard to help the more competitive minded. To have an external incentive to play again to play with. Um, just like a mana curve during the kind of deck view page, which would be helpful because I'm having to count them up myself each time after deck construction. And yeah, being able to show which cards are prismatic or not when you're picking them or when you're viewing your deck. These kind of quality of life updates will go a long way to maintain the expeditions community, I think.
Yeah, this all plus I would say more communication about what is happening would be great. Would be what I would be look for 2022. As I really like the idea of seeing if the card is prismatic during the picking time, so I can choose, so I can start choosing based on if the card is prismatic or not on the power level. This is a pretty good change, and yeah, let's hope. Let's hope for some kind of competitive format. So for some kind of option to see how in a bigger scale our skills and our runs look like in the bigger picture.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also hope for like this leaderboard. I just was laughing because Myzrael said we can choose by prismatics and wouldn't affect my choices that much because all my Targon cards are prismatic, except for like 40 or so, which is bad. Just go by prismatics, I just still go by good cards. And yeah, I also hope to get more communication, maybe one dedicated to expeditions, format update, bucket rebalancing, shifting format, even standard format, maybe different buckets rotating in and out, like balanced against each other. Fun thing. And I also have like guys have it too. I have a personal resolution I want to do in the new year in expeditions. One thing I never did before was drafting the Elise bucket, the spiderlings with the, how's it called, Iceborne Legacy. Sounds like very fun. I turned it prismatic recently. Prismatic chest, spiders plus Iceborne Legacy. Personally, I want to try out in expedition. Anything you want to still give a shot?
I am aiming for a 5.0 average in terms of win rate on the Law Guardian leaderboard. So if I ever reach that by the end of next year, I'll be quite happy. But it's going to be pretty tough because I actually assume some people like Redman actually have it on their leaderboard, but I can't see it. But Ace G0 got so close, 4.99. So I want to have the first visible one at 5.0, but yeah, I don't know if I'll achieve that.
My resolution is to play more darkness in expeditions.
It's supposed to change,
this is what I
not do
want
the
to
same
do.
again.
Why? Why changing something that is good? I don't understand.
You have to draft more
And also,
Aphelios.
yeah, and also try to get on the board with amount of 7 wins. I'm not that far away since 25th position is 61, and I have 19 recorded 7 wins right now. So I'm going to do it. I did 2 7 win runs today, so it helped a little. So we're going for this.
Okay. I wish everybody a good new year, and I hope you all reach your personal expedition goals or whatever goals you might have in Legends of Terra. Thank you so much for watching. Hope learned something on our history lesson. Forward to a glorious 2022. Yeah.
Remember to join the Discord. Link is gonna be below the video as always. Have a nice 2022 and open to that.